Hey, what's up guys, Rev here. So there's been a lot of drama in the video game industry this week, and a lot of it has to do with optics. How do these companies look in the eyes of gamers? Well, today we're going to look at two examples. One example of a company looking really good in terms of optics, and another example of a company looking really bad. That example being SEGA. There has been a communal curb stomping of SEGA over the past couple of days because they came out and not only contributed to, but also shared this Japan Times article, which we covered in a previous video, but to sum up the article, it basically says that video game companies like SEGA need to put more trust and authority into English localizers. In fact, they go as far as to say that this stuff needs to happen at the ground level, at the development stage. They need to take into consideration concerns of English localizers. Obviously, a lot of people had problems with that, and then they would respond by making this post right here, reminding the public that SEGA has a customer harassment policy. So this policy itself is not a bad thing, right? I think every company should have something like this, but the timing of this makes the optics look really bad. So you come out and your developers contribute to a very heavily criticized article about localization in video games, and then you immediately remind the public that they can be sued by your company if your employees are being mistreated. That's really bad timing, and the optics look really bad. Making it worse is this. So the developer who made comments in that article would see this bad PR that SEGA is facing and basically said, "Hold my beer, I'm gonna make it worse." So they came out with this tweet right here saying, about localization, "It seems that some of the story has been misrepresented, but localization does not change the original Japanese content. I have them checked to make sure there are no unintentional derogatory terms, discriminatory expressions, religious issues, etc., and then correct them with the original script. In other words, there is no difference between the Japanese version and the overseas version." So I don't know if this is some kind of a Google Translate hit job here, but right here he says there's no difference between the Japanese version and the overseas version, and then in the last paragraph says that we changed the scripts, the original scripts, to fit concerns about Western localizations. He basically said, no, you guys are wrong. These changes don't happen at the Western localization phase as it's going into the overseas market. It happens right at the development stage. We're doing it preemptively. We're listening to localizers as we're creating the original Japanese media. That's not good, okay? And this really reflects what was in the article. I mean, he flat out said that they're willing to change the original content with the concerns of United States and European localizers in mind. In fact, later in that article as well, he goes on to talk about school shootings and how he's concerned about the influence of violent video games and how that's relating to that issue. Yeah, basically at this point, it's a PR nightmare, and I don't know if SEGA has just kind of packed it in at this point. They don't care about their PR, but if they do, they should pretty much invest in a sort of secret service type team dedicated to jumping out in front of this developer's keyboard every time he reaches for it, because he just keeps making things look worse and worse. So that's an example of bad optics, okay? Here's an example of very good optics. A lot of people have been talking about Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is a game that is being developed by a Korean studio named Shift Up. It's been in the conversation of the public for a couple of years since its trailer released, and right now people are singing the praises of Stellar Blade for multiple reasons. So number one, there has been a very popular post here sharing some information about Stellar Blade developers at Shift Up firing 2 women for being toxic feminists. Now, this is actually something that happened back in August. This was shared by this account. And this really kind of reflects a very positive outlook for this development team. And you can see the former employee here, this feminist, trying to start a boycott thread against the company, saying, "The company that made the game Shift Up removed work of 2 women because they were feminist. I'm a victim and former employee of this game," where they would go on to complain about things like fan service in the game. So number one, let me make this very clear. If your feminist views are conflicting with your work at this company, if you're genuinely having a moral problem with the main protagonist and the fan service of her, how are you supposed to work on this game and exist in the surrounding work environment? It makes sense. It only makes sense that you would be fired. Because how are you supposed to coexist in this company and develop the game that you have a moral problem with based on your feminist views? That doesn't seem like it would ever work out. That's a very fair reaction of these developers. Nobody wants this woke feminist nonsense anyways. But here's this thing too, like the boycott. Ladies and gentlemen, let's remind this person how the Hogwarts Legacy boycott went. I wouldn't suggest going down that route unless you want them to sell even more copies than they will, because the game's releasing in April. And a lot of people have been looking at this and saying, okay, they're firing all these feminist employees who are conflicting with the development of this game. And they're also incorporating a lot of fan service to the delight of gamers. We're sold. Like, you know what? At this point, what do you want me to do? Buy 2 copies at this point? Like, they're just impressing a lot of people with their stance on these things. But a lot of people have been talking about Stellar Blade. Ever since that story about the feminist getting fired started to get a lot of traction over the past couple of days, people have been rehashing their concerns and complaints about the design of the main protagonist of this franchise. And we've seen people make a fool out of themselves over this. So back when this game originally released its trailer, it was actually called Project Eve at the time. A lot of people came forward to complain about the design of the main protagonist, saying that she was unrealistic and had this flawed, terrible design. Well, as it turns out, only about a month ago, it was revealed that the character's design was made using a 3D scan of a Korean model. Now, those people look really, really stupid. This is something we covered in a video about a month ago. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out. But because of this discovery, a lot of old clips from 2021 have aged like milk, including this one.
I do think the character model was actually like very distracting in not a good way, because like with the camera angles chosen, it just felt like this game seems like a game that came out in like 002 in terms of its, you know, like character design. It's like a bit old and not flattering, I don't think, for a modern audience. In comparison to something like Forspoken, which has, you know, I mean, yes, it has a much more realistic looking character designs. It's not these hyper proportioned something or another's, but it also seemed, I don't know, a bit more grounded in a way that I found much more appealing.
So that was back from a few years ago, but here we are in 2024 and people are still crying about this game and its fan service. So we have this tweet from the other day. It's showing a screenshot of some upskirt shots of the main protagonist. I obviously can't show them on YouTube, but they made this caption saying, when developers resort to sex to sell their game, it usually means the game is lacking. Now, there's a lot I could say here, but I could really sum it all up with 2 words. Near automa, because that's exactly the kind of vibe we're getting here, because good stories and fan service are not mutually exclusive. They can exist at the same time, and it's been done time and time again. But this whole complaint about sex to sell a game, you know, sex selling, sex sells. It does. It's a concept that works, especially with video games. Fan service sells copies. And this is unlike all of the buttoned up and ugly designs that Western devs have been pushing down the throats of gamers for the past couple of years, and no one's buying those games. People are buying the games with fan service. Gamers enjoy fan service, largely speaking. And if there's gamers out there who don't, there's plenty of titles they can check out without fan service. But moving on, we're about to see one of the biggest cases of projection I've seen in a minute. So this journalist says, so apparently this is the actress who was body scanned to be the main character in Stellar Blade. Looks just like her. Where down here they would also add on, the body scan included the face. So they're saying that this character design looks just like this adult model, including in terms of their facial appearances, okay? So later on, they would say this to a user. True, like I said, graphically and combat-wise, it looks great, but I can't get past their faces looking like little girls. It's weird. Either way, we will see how they turn out when they are released. Holy projection. This guy sees something that he admits is reflecting an adult woman, and not to mention the fact it's a video game character, and the first thing he thinks of is little girls. That is very strange. I don't know why anyone would tweet this out publicly. It is the biggest projection I've ever seen, and this is something that people would point out in further replies where they're getting absolutely bodied in these replies, by the way, where the journalist would say, "That sounds like something someone who is hiding something would say. Yeah, buddy, projection. If it makes you feel better, I'm not the only one who thinks that too." That is not helping your case, by the way. And then they say, "And you know damn well that is what they are going for. Stop playing yourself even with the voices. However, there are some Asian games that have a great job showing sexy bodies with mature faces." I mean, what does this guy want? Like an 80-year-old woman's face on these video game characters so he can stop thinking about little girls? Like, it's very strange. Crazy amounts of projection, but yeah. There's still more people complaining about the fan service aspect. This tweet saying, "The Thirst Trap Stellar Blade looked awful with very outdated graphics, and it obviously uses sex to sell because they lack real talent. What is this running animation? PlayStation is an embarrassment. No wonder Xbox won the gen easily." Yeah. Are you getting the idea that they might be a little bit of a biased Xbox fan? Yeah, seems pretty obvious. But in the replies, they would keep going when someone would say, "To be fair, the running animation is close to that of Nier Automata. I like how if the protagonist of the game is pretty looking with assets that actually exist in real life, Western people get angry. Get over it." Where the original poster would respond saying, "Where have you seen someone run like this in real life? The model that the game used to create the character is flat too. Ponies will say anything to cope about their garbage-looking game. No problem with creating good-looking female, unlike Abby, but making the character run like this to show its ass because your game is boring is just cheap. I am not Western." Holy projection once again, but yeah. You can see the coping. People are getting very angry about Stellar Blade. It's getting on sort of Pal World levels of delusions where people are just seething over this game. It's just triggered them for some reason, and they will go to any crazy extension of logic to try to justify their hatred of this game and anything to do with it. But really, when it comes down to this, a lot of people are looking at this situation. We talked about optics at the beginning of this video, how SEGA is looking to gamers, and how companies like Shift Up are looking to gamers. And really, thank God for studios like Shift Up, at least giving us some hope that these developers are paying attention to the wants and needs of actual gamers and instead are not listening to these screeching weirdos on Twitter. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please share all of your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time.